Hi, this is Grady from SUBOVERLAND, and in this video I'll be going over a pre-trip inspection. So this is just something that you can do before you go on a major trip. And let's get right into it. So the first thing that I do when I start prepping for a trip, as far as the vehicle goes, is check tire pressures. And so I'll walk around and I'll have my little tool, and I'll check the pressures of each tire. We usually like to run our tires 35 to 50 pounds, depending on what kind of ride comfort you're wanting and how heavy your load is and everything. But I would say on average, your typical, like with your typical load and not like towing a trailer or anything, right around 35 to 40 is what I like to put my tires at. The tires that we use on our vehicles are a 10-ply tire, so it's a load rating E, and they go up to 80 psi. Now, that does not mean that you should have 80 psi in those tires. So there's a load rating, there's a range of pressure that you can use, and it goes up to that amount. That is a very harsh ride, and I would not suggest it unless you're towing something very heavy. And so just go around, check the tires as far as the pressures, and then while you're doing that, I always like to look for anything that may be protruding from the tire, like a screw or a nail or anything like that. You can also check at this point for cupping on the treads. Cupping, if you don't know what it is, it's just like an uneven wear pattern, usually mainly on the front tires, and it can be caused by not keeping up on your rotations or a bad alignment, or just it was a bad compound of tire. And so there's a couple things to check there. If that's the case, then you can just get a rotation and usually be fine. It's not like a death sentence for the tire in most cases, unless it's very severe. The next thing that I would do is start in on the lights. And so I'll put on the hazards and walk around the vehicle, see if all my blinkers are working, along with headlights, brake lights, so all of the exterior lights on the vehicle. That's a big thing. It's just it's getting a ticket obviously isn't fun, but also just safety reasons is the main reason. You don't want to cause an accident or get an accident yourself. That's just, no one wants that. And then after I check the lights, I will go into the engine compartment and start checking fluids. And so I'll pop the hood and start with the engine oil. And the engine oil is the yellow dipstick. And if you don't know procedure of that, it's pretty simple. You pull it out, wipe it with a paper towel, reinsert it, pull it out again, and then you can get your reading. And on that dipstick, usually with our vehicles, it'll have a couple holes, and those holes measure each. It's a measurement, and so from the full mark to the add mark is about 1 quart, and so that's a good gauge as far as that goes. And as far as oil goes too, our vehicles, usually mileage on these is usually 150 to 250, somewhere in that range. And depending on the vehicle and different things, you may need to top during a regular 3,000 mile interval. And so I usually like to keep a quart laying around, and I always encourage our clients to, especially on their maiden voyage, when they pick up the vehicle and go back, is to check the oil on when you're filling up with gas, it just doesn't hurt. It's always good to be in that habit just in general, regardless of what vehicle that you drive. It just happens. Engines, especially when they get a little tired, you might get a little usage of oil either through a leak or you're using it. And our vehicles obviously are inspected by us, and so we would never send out a vehicle or purchase a vehicle that was, for example, smoking from the tailpipe from a very excessive use of burning oil, or send it to a client with a big leak like a rear main or something like that. We take care of those. But just like any car, it will have minor leaks over the years. So that's enough on the engine oil, but it's a very important one. And also on engine oil, it'll ding at you on some of these when it gets to a low setting, but you should never really trust that. You should just be in control of that, and you can be in control, and it doesn't take a lot of effort. The next one I'll go over is the transmission fluid, and that's the red dipstick next to the yellow one. Transmission is a little more tricky to check. You have to have the car running in park, so you park it on a flat surface, and then you run it through the gears. So your foot's on the brake, you're not moving anywhere. You put it down into drive, 3, 2, 1, reverse that procedure, put it into reverse, put it up into park, and then at that point, let it sit for a second, go, and then you can do the same procedure as oil. So pull the dipstick out, wipe it, reinsert, pull it out again, and then you'll have your reading. Now it'll have a hot and a cold on that dipstick, and depending on if you've driven a lot, it takes a lot of driving to get the transmission up to operating temperature. So I would, depending on when we check it, you're supposed to check it when it's hot, but if you don't have that time, you can check it when it's cold, and you'll see that on there, on the dipstick. Now with adding fluid, this is another one that it's not as common to add fluid to transmission. If you're having to add constantly, then there's an issue as far as leaking, and it's more than likely a pan gasket or cooler lines or something along those. But a transmission will not use oil; it'll leak it, not like an engine for the most part. And when you're topping that off, if you ever have to, be careful. Start with a pint at a time. It's not like the dipsticks are not treated equal. When you top off a transmission, you use just a pint at a time, and don't overdo it, because between full and empty, it's not a quart. It's more like a quarter of a quart. And so just kind of keep your eye on that on most of these. The next thing I'll move into is the coolant reservoir, and that is found on the same side of the engine. Now, be careful with this. This particular vehicle that I was doing is like an 05, 04 Suburban, and so it has a coolant reservoir. It doesn't have a radiator cap on the radiator like you would see on an older vehicle. But this reservoir is pressurized, and so if the engine is hot and you're up to operating temperature, just be careful when you're checking that, and it's better if you check it when it's cold. And on the side of the reservoir, you'll see a high, a high and a low mark there, and it'll just be full cold, full hot, I want to say, and so you can gauge that. This one's a little tricky to see, so sometimes I like to grab like the reservoir and kind of move it around and look down inside, and then you can top it off. Now, topping it off doesn't mean you're going all the way up to where it's overflowing or anything like that. There's, like I said, there's a mark, and so just be careful there. Just because the reservoir is half full or less, because that's where the mark is, doesn't mean that you need to add any more. So hopefully that makes sense. Next one I'll go over is the brake fluid, and that's found on the driver's side. It's .3 on all these, and again, this one, if you have a major, it's very rare to see a leak with brake fluid. So next one is power steering fluid. Same thing, this one really, I never, on these things you don't run into much power steering leakages, like a big, big deals or anything like that. So that one is found, it's down by there's a red rectangle that's, have like a plus sign on it, and that's where the alternator is plugged in. Anyway, so you'll see it down there, driver's side, and you just unscrew the cap like this, and then it's just kind of like a dipstick. It'll show you full and all that. And then the next one is the windshield washer fluid, and there's no real mark on this. You just top it off until it overflows pretty much. And that sums it up for the fluids, I would say, for the major trip. Now underneath the vehicle there are, the transfer case, front and rear differential, and those are changed every 30,000 miles. And so if you're, wanting to get those checked, you could take it into someone and they could, do a pre-trip inspection as far as, going full blown. But that's not a necessary thing unless you see like a giant, like a good leak in your driveway from underneath the vehicle, from the rear of the vehicle, or where those, where the front diff or transfer case or rear diff is. At that point, obviously you would need to go take that in. But as far as a regular pre-trip, it's not as necessary. And that pretty much sums up all the fluids. In recap, really, it's good to have fluid on hand. So I usually have a quart of engine oil and a quart of transmission fluid, and that's about it really for fluids. We use these are 5W30. We use a semi-synthetic. We use a Valvoline oils. It's good to keep good oils, but if you're in a pinch, you can get gas station oils will work for topping off, but I would never use that for a full change. I would say that's getting pretty close to what I do for inspection. So we did tires, lights, and fluids. And then another thing that I will do is just walk around the vehicle and do a visual. And so kind of like when I was checking the tires, but you can add that to, if there was, a piece of plastic like on the front bumper or cowling or something that's coming loose or anything like that, that you might be able, you should address before your trip. And then another thing I will do, you obviously will probably be driving this vehicle as either as a daily driver or you'll drive it, at some point before your trip. But I'll do, like a month before or, a week before or whatever, depending on the trip, I'll get it in 4-wheel drive and see if the 4-wheel drive is functioning. And I have a video on, 4-wheel drive functionality and everything like that you could check out. But that's good. That's not like a good thing to check the day before, because if there is a problem, then, depending on if you're mechanically inclined or you have to take it into someone, you're not going to have time. And so that one, is a good one to check and plan for that. So that sums up this video. Thanks for watching. Keep in mind that these pre-trip inspections, this is just my way of doing it, and I'm sure I've missed out on maybe some things. And so if you have any of your own, things that you do, procedures that you do, feel free to comment below, and I would love, to read them and learn from all of you too. But this has really worked out for me throughout, I guess, my life of driving vehicles. And it's really good to get to know your vehicle, and checking oils and knowing where the fluids are and just knowing those basics is a huge plus in the long run for sure. And so just do it, it's very important. And I suggest all, especially to our clients that are watching this, it's a good thing to do. So thanks for watching, and please subscribe. And this is my second video of 2022, and I'm really excited for this year. But thanks again.